I saw the same car for the third time, just past a dead stretch of Route 66, and by then, I knew it wasn't coincidence. It hadn't passed me once, hadn't pulled over, hadn't taken any exits. It just kept showing up again, miles ahead, like it knew exactly where I'd be. If you've driven long enough, you learn to ignore things that don't make sense at first, because most of the time there's an explanation. But that night, somewhere between the empty road and that second mirror check, I realized I wasn't dealing with something normal. The first time I saw it was earlier that night, just outside a gas station near Amarillo. It was parked off to the side, engine off, lights dead, like it had been sitting there for hours. I didn't think much of it. Places like that always have a few vehicles that don't seem to belong. I got back on the road and merged onto Route 66, settling into that quiet rhythm where the engine hum and the darkness start to blur together. About 40 minutes in, I noticed headlights far behind me. Nothing unusual, just another driver on the same stretch of road. But when I checked the mirror again, something felt off. The distance hadn't changed. It wasn't getting closer, wasn't falling back. It was just there, fixed, like it was locked to me somehow, matching every adjustment I made without trying to pass. I slowed down slightly, expecting it to overtake. It didn't. I sped up, pushing a little above my usual pace. Still nothing. Same distance. Same angle. That's when it stopped feeling like coincidence and started feeling deliberate. After a while, it disappeared. No turn signal. No exit lights. No change in speed. One moment it was there, and the next, the road behind me was completely empty. I remember staring at the mirror longer than I should have, waiting for it to reappear. It didn't. I told myself it had taken an exit. I didn't notice. Happens more than you think when you're tired. So I let it go and kept driving, trying to shake that feeling that something wasn't adding up. About an hour later, I saw it again. This time it wasn't behind me. It was ahead, parked on the shoulder like it had been waiting. Same shape, same low profile. No lights, no movement, just sitting there in the dark. As I passed it, I glanced sideways just enough to see inside. There was someone in the driver's seat, completely still, facing forward, not looking at me, not reacting, just there. I checked the mirror instinctively. The road behind me was empty again. No headlights. No sign that it had pulled out. Nothing. That's when the feeling changed. It wasn't just that something strange was happening. It was that, whatever it was, didn't follow the rules of the road. The third time I saw it was where everything stopped making sense. It was moving again, ahead of me, keeping the same distance it had earlier. Not fast, not slow, just matching my speed perfectly. I could see the outline clearly now, enough to know it was the same car. I decided to test it. I eased off the accelerator, dropping speed gradually. For a moment, nothing changed. Then the distance between us started to close. Not because it slowed down, but because it didn't adjust at all. Like it wasn't reacting, just moving on a set path. As I got closer, I leaned forward slightly, trying to get a better look inside. That's when it drifted off the road. No brake lights, no dust from the shoulder, no turn. It just wasn't there anymore, like it had been erased from the space it occupied. I hit the brakes harder than I meant to and pulled onto the shoulder, my heart pounding harder than I'd admit. The road was flat, open for miles. There was nowhere for it to go. No side roads, no dips, nothing. I sat there for a moment, engine running, staring ahead, trying to convince myself I'd missed something. That exhaustion was messing with my head, that there was a logical explanation. Then I reached for my phone. I don't even remember why. Maybe to check the route. Maybe just to ground myself in something normal. But when the screen lit up, there was a notification I didn't recognize. Location active. I frowned and opened it, expecting some leftover app I'd forgotten about. Instead, a map loaded instantly. My route was highlighted in blue, tracing every mile I'd driven since leaving Amarillo. And just ahead of that line, there was a marker, moving. It was following the same path, matching my speed almost exactly. The label beneath it read, Observer. I felt my grip tighten around the phone, because behind my position, there was nothing. No second marker, no trailing vehicle, just empty space, which meant whatever that marker represented wasn't behind me, it was ahead. I looked up slowly, eyes scanning the empty road in front of me. Nothing. Just darkness and the faint reflection of my headlights, stretching into the distance. Then I checked the mirror, and this time, the car was there again, closer than it had ever been. Close enough that I could see inside clearly. Close enough that there was no mistaking what I was looking at. The driver. Same build, same posture, same hands on the wheel. It was me. I froze, staring at the reflection, trying to process what I was seeing. Every instinct told me to look away, but I couldn't, because something wasn't right. The reflection wasn't moving exactly the way I was. My hands were steady on the wheel. His fingers twitched just slightly, just enough to notice. Then his head tilted forward a fraction, like he was leaning in for a better look. And that's when I realized something that made everything else feel small. I hadn't seen that car behind me earlier, because it hadn't been following me. It had been waiting ahead, positioning itself, over and over again, learning my route, my speed, my habits. And now, as I stared into the mirror, watching that version of me stare back with a slow, deliberate smile forming across his face, I understood something I wish I never had. The marker on that map wasn't tracking a vehicle. It was tracking me, and whatever was in that car was getting closer each time. I sped up the car and got back on the road, looked in the side mirror, and the car was stopped. The door opened, and his silhouette got out and stood watching me with a sinister smile. I didn't look in the mirror again after that. I continued on the road going as fast as possible. After 15 minutes, I arrived at a rest stop, and I stopped immediately. I needed to see people. I went into the restaurant and sat in the back. I kept thinking about everything that happened, and I can't come up with any reasonable explanation. Since that day, I only passed through that stretch during the day. I don't want to feel that sensation again, ever again. There's a pattern in stories like this that people don't usually notice at first. It's not just a repetition, it's the adjustment. Whatever was out there wasn't reacting to the road, it was reacting to him. Learning, correcting, getting closer each time without ever needing to chase. If something like that ever appeared in your mirror, would you keep driving? Or would you try to break the pattern before it learned too much about you? Because sometimes the most dangerous thing isn't being followed, it's being understood. If you're drawn to stories that feel just a little too real, subscribe and stay with me. And before the next one begins, tell me, what would you have done the moment you realized it wasn't behind you, but already ahead? The first time the voice came through the radio, it didn't sound strange. Just low, steady, like any other driver trying to get a signal through the static. It said my call sign once, clearly, like it had no trouble reaching me. I didn't answer right away. Late night chatter isn't unusual, but something about the timing felt off. There hadn't been any traffic for miles, and the channel had been dead quiet until that moment. I reached for the mic anyway, pressed it halfway, then stopped. Something in my chest tightened for no reason I could explain. Instead, I let go and kept driving, eyes forward, pretending I hadn't heard it. A few seconds passed, and the voice came back. This time, it didn't say my call sign. It said my route, exact highway, exact direction, even the mile marker I had just passed, like it had been watching me the whole time. I felt my grip on the wheel tighten as I glanced at the GPS. There was no one ahead of me, no one behind me. Just empty road and that faint hum of the engine cutting through the dark. I picked up the mic and responded, keeping my voice steady. Asked who was calling, where they were. Standard stuff. What came back wasn't standard. Don't slow down. That's all it said. No explanation. No tone change. Just those 3 words, calm and direct, like it expected me to understand what they meant. I frowned, scanned the road again, and eased off the accelerator slightly without thinking. The moment I did, the radio crackled violently, louder than before, almost like feedback. And the voice came back, sharper this time. I said don't slow down. I pressed the gas again immediately, heart picking up speed to match the engine. I didn't know why I listened. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was the way the voice said it, like it wasn't a suggestion. For the next few miles, nothing happened. The road stayed empty, the radio silent. I started to convince myself it had just been some driver messing with me, someone picking up my signal and playing a game. Then I saw the headlights. Far ahead, just barely visible through a curve in the road. They weren't moving like normal traffic. They were wrong, too still, too steady, like they were waiting instead of approaching. I slowed down again, just slightly, trying to get a better look. The radio exploded with static. Keep moving. The voice wasn't calm anymore. There was something else in it now. Something urgent. Something that didn't feel human. I pushed the accelerator harder this time, eyes locked on those distant lights. As I got closer, I realized they weren't facing me. They were angled, slightly off the road, like the vehicle was parked. And as I passed, I saw why. There was a truck off the shoulder, tilted at an angle, front crushed inward, like it had hit something hard. The headlights were still on, but there was no movement inside. No hazard lights. No sign anyone had tried to call for help. I didn't stop. I kept driving, heart pounding, eyes flicking to the mirror every few seconds. The road behind me stayed empty. No one pulled out. No one followed. The radio stayed quiet for a while after that, long enough that I started to think it was over. Then it spoke again. Next one's different. I swallowed hard, not taking my eyes off the road. What do you mean? I asked, voice barely steady. There was a pause this time, longer than before, like it was choosing its words. You won't see it. A cold feeling settled in my chest as those words sank in. I didn't know what it meant, but I knew I didn't want to find out. A few miles passed, then 10, then 20. Nothing. No lights, no movement. Just that endless stretch of road and the sound of my own breathing getting louder in the cab. I started to think maybe it was wrong. Then I felt it. Not saw, not heard. Felt a shift in the truck. Subtle at first, like a change in weight distribution. The kind of thing you notice when cargo moves slightly in the trailer. Except my load hadn't changed. I glanced in the side mirror, trying to see the trailer. Nothing unusual. Just the long dark shape trailing behind me. And the radio crackled again. Don't look back. My hand froze halfway to the mirror adjustment. Why? I asked, even though I wasn't sure I wanted the answer. The voice didn't hesitate this time. Because it's not in the trailer anymore. Every muscle in my body went rigid. I stared straight ahead, forcing myself not to turn, not to check, not to confirm what it had just said. But the feeling in the cab was getting stronger. Like something had shifted forward, closer. I could hear it now. A faint sound, almost drowned out by the engine. Slow, uneven, like something dragging lightly across the floor behind the seat. My breathing turned shallow as I tightened my grip on the wheel. Keep driving, the voice said, quieter now. Just keep driving. The sound got louder, closer. I could feel it directly behind me now. Not touching, not quite, just there. Close enough that if I leaned back even slightly, I'd make contact. I squeezed my eyes shut for a second, then opened them again, focusing on the road, on the lines, on anything that wasn't what was happening inside the cab. "Almost there," the voice said. "Where?" I whispered. There was a pause. Then, softly, "Where I am." Something brushed against the back of my seat. Not hard, not fast, just a light, deliberate contact, like fingers testing the distance. I couldn't stop myself anymore. I looked in the mirror, and for a split second, I saw nothing. Then the reflection shifted, and I realized the mirror wasn't showing the inside of my cab. It was showing the road behind me. Empty, no truck, no trailer, no lights, just darkness. I snapped my eyes forward again, panic hitting full force as I tried to make sense of what I had just seen. "Keep driving," the voice said again. But this time, it wasn't coming from the radio. It was coming from right behind me. Same tone, same cadence, same voice, close enough that I could feel the breath against the back of my neck. And as I stared at the empty road ahead, hands locked on the wheel, unable to move, unable to speak, I realized something that made everything else fall into place. The truck in the ditch back there, the one I didn't stop for, that wasn't someone else. That was me. And whatever had been waiting there was now driving. Then, suddenly, everything went black, and when I realized it, I was stopped on the shoulder of the road. I was confused for about 5 minutes. I didn't understand anything. My heart slowed down, and I calmed down, but nothing made sense. I got back on the road normally and arrived at my destination. But to this day, I don't know what that was, and to be honest, I don't want to know anymore. I just avoid that stretch. I had heard stories about Route 66, but this was the first time it happened to me. There's something deeply unsettling about this one. Not just the voice, but the timing. It didn't warn him randomly. It guided him, corrected him, kept him moving just enough to avoid seeing what was waiting until it was already too late. So here's the question. If you heard a voice like that on an empty road, giving you instructions that kept you safe at first, would you trust it? Or would you risk stopping to find out what it was trying to hide? If you're drawn to stories where something feels just slightly off, like it's following rules you don't, understand, subscribe, and stay with me. And before the next story begins, tell me this. At what point would you have turned around, knowing you might not be the one driving anymore? I picked him up just after midnight at a truck stop that barely had lights working, the kind of place you don't remember passing until you're already pulling in. He was standing near the edge of the lot, away from the entrance, like he didn't want to be seen asking for a ride. I almost kept driving. There was nothing obviously wrong about him, older guy, thin, wearing a worn jacket, but something about the way he was just waiting there, completely still, made me hesitate. Then he raised his hand slowly, not waving, just enough to signal. I stopped. He climbed in without saying much, nodded once like we had already agreed on something, and closed the door carefully behind him. No rush, no awkwardness, just calm, like he'd done this before. "Where are you headed?" I asked, keeping my eyes on the road. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked forward, hands resting on his lap, and after a few seconds he said, "Same direction as you." Something about the way he said it made me glance at him, but his expression hadn't changed. Neutral, almost blank. I shrugged it off and kept driving. For a while, neither of us spoke. The road stretched out ahead, empty and quiet, and the only sound inside the cab was the steady hum of the engine. Every now and then, I'd check the mirror out of habit, but nothing unusual showed up. No cars, no lights, just darkness behind us. Then he spoke again. "You've been on this road before." It wasn't a question. "Yeah," I said. "A few times." He nodded slightly, still looking forward. "Not like this." I frowned, but didn't respond. I wasn't sure what he meant, and honestly, I didn't want to ask. Conversations like that tend to go nowhere good when you're driving through empty stretches at night. A few minutes passed. Then he said something that made my stomach tighten. "You saw the car, didn't you?" My grip on the wheel tightened just enough to notice. "I don't know what you're talking about," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. He didn't react, didn't turn to look at me, just kept staring ahead like he was watching something I couldn't see. "It shows up before it needs to," he said quietly. "That's how you know it's not following you." I felt a cold weight settle in my chest. "How do you know that?" I asked. This time, he smiled slightly, because it did the same thing to me. The air in the cab felt heavier after that. I kept my eyes on the road, but every instinct was telling me something was wrong. Not just with what he was saying, but with the way he was saying it, like he wasn't remembering something that happened, but something that was still happening. We drove in silence again, long enough that I started to convince myself I had misheard him, and it was just a weird conversation, nothing more. Until he shifted slightly in his seat and said, "You shouldn't have stopped back there." I turned my head just enough to look at him. "What do you mean?" His expression hadn't changed. "The truck in the ditch," he said. "You saw it." My heart skipped. I hadn't told him that. I hadn't mentioned anything about the road behind me, about the crash, about the headlights still on in the dark. There was no way he could know that, unless— "You were there?" I asked. He shook his head slowly. "No," he said. "Not yet." A silence followed that felt different from the others. He shifted again, just slightly, and I noticed for the first time that his hands weren't resting the way I thought they were. They were too still, too perfectly placed, like they had been set there and never moved. "You don't remember picking me up," he said. I frowned. "Yeah, I do." "No," he repeated, softer now. "Not the first time." My chest tightened. "What are you talking about?" He turned his head toward me slowly. For the first time since he got in, he looked directly at me, and that's when I realized something was wrong. Not with his face, with his reflection. I hadn't noticed it before, but in the side mirror, where I should have seen part of him sitting next to me, there was nothing. The seat was empty. I blinked hard and looked back at him, then at the mirror again. Still empty. "You see it now," he said. My breathing started to pick up as I forced myself to look forward again, trying to keep control, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. "This is where it changes," he continued. "This is where you start noticing things you missed before." "Before?" I repeated. He nodded. "You always notice the mirror too late." My hands were shaking now. I tightened my grip on the wheel, trying to ground myself, trying to focus on the road, but the air inside the cab felt wrong. Thicker, warmer, like something else was there besides the two of us. "You stopped for me again," he said. "That's how I got back in." "I don't know what you're talking about," I snapped, louder than I meant to. He didn't react. "You never do," he said calmly. "Not until this part." I glanced at him again, and at the mirror, still empty. "You should have kept driving," he added. The words hit harder this time, because I remembered something. Not clearly, not fully, but enough. A flash of headlights, a shape on the side of the road, a moment where I slowed down, when I shouldn't have. "You're not supposed to be here," I said quietly. He smiled again. "Neither are you." The truck hit a slight bump in the road, and for a split second, everything shifted. The lights, the sound, the feeling in the cab, and when it settled again, something was different. The passenger seat felt occupied, not the same way as before, closer. He leaned slightly toward me. "You want to know where I'm going?" he asked. I didn't answer. "You already know," he said, and then he pointed forward. I followed his gesture. Up ahead, just barely visible in the darkness, there were lights, tilted at an angle. Faint, familiar. A truck off the side of the road. Headlights still on. Engine silent, waiting. My breath caught as I stared at it. A cold realization settling in before I could stop it. "That's not," I started. "It is," he interrupted softly. I shook my head, panic rising. No, that's not possible. He leaned closer. So was I. I looked at the mirror one last time. And this time, I saw him. Not beside me. Not behind me. But sitting in the driver's seat. Hands on the wheel. Looking forward. Driving. I snapped my eyes ahead again. Heart pounding. Hands gripping the wheel so hard they hurt. But something felt wrong. The steering didn't respond the way it should have. The road didn't feel under my control anymore. And as the lights from the crashed truck grew closer, reflecting in the windshield, I heard his voice one last time, calm, certain, right next to my ear. You'll remember everything, right before you stop again. I was in shock for a few minutes. When I fixed my eyes on the road again, the lights had disappeared, and the road was completely empty. Since that day, I no longer drive at night on that road, and I no longer give rides. Route 66 is well known for these stories, which many confuse with tiredness, but only those who have been there know that they are truly terrifying. There's something in this one that doesn't let go. Not the ride, not the passenger, but the idea that it wasn't the first time, and it won't be the last. If he didn't ask where you were going, was it because he already knew where you would end? If you checked your mirror right now, would you recognize who's sitting beside you? Or would it already be too late to notice the difference? And if you reached for the wheel, and it didn't respond the way it should, would you even know when you lost control? Tell me this, if you saw those headlights waiting ahead on an empty road, would you slow down? Or would you keep driving, knowing that stopping once might be all it takes to let something back in? Some roads don't end when you leave them, and some things don't stay behind, no matter how far you drive. What you heard tonight isn't just about the dark. It's about patterns, choices, and the moments you don't question until it's too late. If these stories stayed with you, then you're already part of it. Subscribe now and keep listening, because the next account might sound familiar in ways you won't expect. And before you go, look at the final screen. There are 2 more stories waiting for you there. But think about this before you click. If something has been following the same route as you, how would you know it hasn't already learned exactly where you're going next?